Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, brothers. Okay, so we're starting a new course, inshallah, today. The course is called Grounded, Being Muslim in a Godless World. It's a brand new course. We haven't officially launched it yet. This is a version of that course, right? So this is not going to be the title for the course itself. It's the title for this workshop that we're doing, inshallah. That being said, there's going to be, again, we're going to make it interactive like the last sessions. But keep in mind that your interactions in this course is going to be far more useful, because a lot of the interactions we have and the input I get from you guys may go towards, or inshallah will go towards, developing aspects of this course as well, right? So there's a lot of reward inshallah in this for all of us. So pay attention, throw out ideas, discuss it. There's no wrong answers, and we'll inshallah get a good understanding of the things we're discussing through this process, inshallah. So, like I said, the course is grounded, being Muslim in a godless world. You guys probably have a gist of what it's about. But just to give you some context, the demographic this course is designed for is for a younger Muslim audience. Okay, so when I say younger Muslim audience, we're saying pre-university. So college age, first year university age. And the idea behind it is to train or educate young Muslims in a way that it immunizes them against the ideologies that exist out there today. Because currently there's a disparity, or there's a gap in our dawah, right? Which is, we have amazing content that deals with people with doubts now, right? We have brilliant content as far as how to give dawah. We covered the basic form of the dawah training course that Sapience does. But what we don't have is something to help younger Muslims so they don't fall into that trap in the first place. Falling into doubts and having shubahat, coming across different ideologies, many ideologies that exist today, and then following those, or falling into the trap of those ideologies and turning away from Islam as a result of that. Okay, so that's the objective of this course. So it's designed for a younger audience, inshallah, and I'm sure you'll find it beneficial in a way that you can use this content with younger members of your family as well that may be approaching the age of university or going into university, inshallah. You may find some things which are useful for yourselves as well. They may reframe certain ideas and concepts that you have. Okay. Now the basic breakdown of the course is three main parts in this course. The first part is where we get a overview of how we've ended up where we are today, meaning how we've ended up in the world that we live in today, and the world that's governed by a specific ideology, a specific worldview. We'll be exploring worldviews. We'll be exploring the history of how we've ended up with naturalism, atheism, feminism, all of these isms and schisms, where they originated from, why they have become so dominant today. Then we'll also go into looking at the crises of the modern worldview. Okay, like what are the shortcomings, what are the flaws, because these things aren't spoken about much, especially in the dawah. So this will be the dawah angle here, because a lot of the dawah focuses on proving or making a case for Islam and refuting the other ideologies, right? But this will help us because we'll see another perspective to the dawah now, which is, okay, there's an existential dimension here, which is that the worldviews that we're challenging, they have some fundamental flaws and issues that no one's speaking about, that no one's addressing. So we'll learn that and we'll be able to tackle. So we'll put us in a very sort of dominant position from that perspective, that we don't have to be on the back foot in the court of law trying to defend Islam. If anything, we can expose the flaws of the ideologies that exist out there and bring them into play and discuss them with people and show those people how Islam addresses those flaws, how the Islamic worldview doesn't have those flaws and issues. Okay, and then in the third part of the course, we will look at, understanding Islam as a worldview. Again, something as Muslims haven't done for a very long time, right? Because generally when we talk about Islam, we understand it as a religion, right? And when we say religion, many people have different definitions of this. Most Muslims see Islam as a set of rules, right? Pretty much, that's what it is. Most young people see it that way. So building a new concept, a new framework, which is Islam is actually a worldview. And once we understand what a worldview is, we'll understand what I mean by Islam as a worldview as well, inshallah, right? So we're not introducing anything new to the deen, we're just highlighting what Islam has already given us, but those things aren't the things that have been focused on as much as they should be focused on, along with the practices of Islam and everything as well, inshallah. So that's a general overview of the course. in this session, what I want to do, hopefully, is that we want to get through the sort of initial concept of a worldview, because that's the primary hinge of this course, okay, is understanding what a worldview is. Now, before we do that, there's a particular ayah of the Quran that's going to be central to this entire course, okay, and that's in chapter 59, verse 19. Can anyone tell me what that ayah is? No. Chapter Surah Hashr, 59, 19.
Give us a hint about what this.
There's a negation in the beginning of the ayah.
What is the beginning of it?
وَلَا تَكُونُوا.
وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ
Yes.
فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم.
Yeah, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Okay, so this is the ayah that's gonna be based on. So let's take a few minutes to really discuss this, and we'll go into this ayah in a lot more detail, and we'll revisit it over and over again as we go through. And it's good to sort of really get a clear understanding of this ayah now, because as we progress through the course, you'll see how relevant this ayah is to everything we're discussing. So what does Allah say in this particular ayah? Allah says, and do not be like those who forgot Allah, so He made them forget themselves. It is they who are truly rebellious. This is one translation of the ayah. Now, what do you think this means?
I think we can translate it with another verse, which says, فَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ
Yes.
وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. Who turn away from this message, which is Islam or Quran, we will make their life like restricted.
Yes.
And we will resurrect them blinded. So I think that verse can help us with
that's a
understanding.
very powerful point. Jazakallah khair. Brilliant point. So the other ayah in the Quran where Allah says, those who turn away from the remembrance of Allah will have constricted and difficult lives. And here Allah is saying, those that forget Allah, turn away from the remembrance of Allah, they won't know who they are. Okay, so here Allah is informing us of the condition of a human being when the human being turns away from his creator. Okay?
It's more like a spiritual loss. Like you can have a lot of worldly possessions but still have a difficult life.
Good. So
being
that's
lost,
yeah.
not having a sense of purpose.
Okay, so that's another powerful point. So what is this loss? Right? Because Allah is saying they won't know who they are. They will lose sense of themselves. Okay?
Being astray.
Yeah, so but let's think about this now, right? Dr. Israr mentions this in a very powerful way as well. Like what is being forgotten? Like if you think about modern man, the modern secular man or woman who doesn't believe in the creator, doesn't recognize their creator, right? Have they forgotten themselves from a physical standpoint? No. If anything, people really take care of their physical selves a lot these days, right? People go to the gym, they have healthy diets, they do yoga, they do therapy, they do all sorts of things to take care of their physical beings, right? And they don't believe in God. So what is Allah speaking about here specifically? What is being lost?
Confusion in life.
Spirituality.
No meaning in the life. No purpose.
Yeah, those are things related to it.
So is it that... sorry, something in my throat. So it's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that knows you because He has created you. And if you forget Allah, then who tells you about yourself? So where do you get this information from? And usually you get it from shaitan. So he will start to tell you things about yourself, which are not necessarily good or true.
Yeah, that's a very powerful way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because Allah knows you best, He created you.
Yes.
So who's going to inform you about yourself better than the one that made you?
To add to the point is when the ayah says you forgot me, so you forgot yourself. So you forgot maybe your main function. Your main function as a person is ما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا يعبدون. I think it's correct. إلا يعبدون, which is I've not created the jinn or mankind unless to worship me. So if you're forgotten Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not worshipping Him. So you're not doing your main process what you should be doing. So you're actually useless of anything.
Okay, so you forget, so what you're saying is you forget your purpose.
Yes.
Why you were created, right? The ultimate purpose of your existence, you won't know. Because if you don't know Allah, you turn away from Him, then you don't know what you're doing here, who you are, right? What else is forgotten?
The source of support. When you go astray, you're not going back to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will leave you to yourself.
So direction is lost.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you are a dependent human being. So you need support all the time, each seconds. That's why the Prophet ﷺ used to say, Allahumma la takilni la nafsi tarfata aynin. don't let me to myself for a blink of an eye. So it means we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a human being in our life each second. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leave us, so there's nothing left.
Yeah. It's good. Anything else?
You'll cut off aspects of the human being that are connected to the Creator, that kind of vertical connection. You'll then replace that concept with something, or something will take its place, or there will be an assumption that that's the whole thing. You'll look at the physical, as you mentioned, as that's the whole human being. You'll forget aspects of the human being that are essential because you're not nurturing that connection. You just won't think that it exists.
That's a beautiful point, yeah. So the essence of the human being is lost. The real, which is the ruh, the soul of the human being that Allah created, that is completely lost, right? Because all you can know is what you can see. And what you see is just the physical aspect of the human being, right? And if someone really reflects and thinks about it, they definitely can see or understand more that you are more than just a physical body. But that's where it essentially stops. What is that additional essence or that self? They can't find the answers by themselves, right? That's if someone thinks to that level. But most people don't, right? So your true essence, which is the I that we refer to, in philosophy they call it the I, the self. Iqbal called it the khudi of the self, right? Persian word that he took from Persian. This essence, the soul, the ruh, the khudi, this essence of the person, the human being, your I, that is lost, right? You don't know what that is, what the true state of that is. What else is lost?
Can you add as well, basically, if you don't have the anchoring of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will lead to nihilism. So you are losing yourself eventually to the gateway of nihilism, because then you have no anchoring with anything you're thinking. What's the point of doing anything? Yeah. There's no real anchor.
Yeah, so nihilism, in a few different senses, the lack of meaning. There is no meaning anymore. Yeah, existential nihilism, ethical or moral nihilism, it's emptiness, right? You don't know who you are, or what your place is in the universe, or what your identity is, or what your ultimate goal is in life. You don't know any of these things, right? So we can see all of these things emerge from this ayah. And what's really interesting also in the Arabic, the word Allah uses is nasya, right? Now there's some very interesting meanings to this word. Allah says, don't be like those who forgot Allah. This nasya, it's a very specific type of forgetting. One aspect of one shade of the meaning of this word is it's a deliberate turning away. And this is very powerful because we know the fitrah is there. It inclines the human being. A sound fitrah, a sound mind inclines the human being to turn towards the ultimate source, towards Allah. But this is a deliberate turning away from Allah. Those that turn away, make the effort to turn away and forget Allah, those people are the ones that forget themselves ultimately. Right? So we're going to come back to anything else, any other points anyone wants to make in regards to this ayah? Yes, bro.
I think the ayah gives a sense that if you forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, Allah will forget you in the other world. Like it means He will put you as a punishment.
Yes.
And you won't be looked after for going to Jannah.
Yes, that's what the scholars mention in the tafsir of this ayah as well. Yes.
I was going to say something, I'm not sure if it's relevant, but I was listening to a podcast of a stand-up comedian, and he does this bit on a joke where he was alone in a car. And it's all dark, it's at night, and there was no one in the car, and he just had this sense of loneliness, and he felt sort of like overwhelming sadness. So he felt his hand go to his phone. So immediately, when you were saying the I, or myself, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. He then continues and says, I decided not to go to the phone and just sit in that, just see what happens. And then he said he started crying, like weeping in the middle of the car for no reason. And he was like, I never understood why that happened. But yeah, it's sort of relevant that when he had this thing inside of him, he wanted to forget himself by going to the phone. So he used it as a distraction. He didn't really look inside. So that's where you sort of forget yourself.
Yeah. That's a very powerful point, because society, the world we live in today, is designed to keep you distracted.
Yes.
Right? Social media, it's constantly you're plugged in to the system. You're either working, right, or you're trying to progress in life and work, or you are on social media, and you know, it's like people, or gaming, or drugs, or pornography. It's like everyone's escaping, right? You're constantly plugged in. That's why what's very interesting is when COVID kicked in, and they didn't make a big deal of this, but a lot of people went through depression, fell into depression, because they were cut off from all of this engagement they were used to, and they had time to sit and think about their lives, right? And as soon as they did that, like the brother said in that example, most people fall into have a breakdown, because now you have the time to think about the bigger questions that you've been pushing under the rug for so long, right?
This is like a successful stand-up comedian. He's like 50 years old. Is Louis C.K. I'm not sure if people know him, but yeah, he literally started crying just because of that sensation. But yeah.
And today's society, a lot of people do fall into this, but many don't because of the distraction. And this has been going on. I mean, if you go back to the 18th and early 19th centuries, you see the existentialist philosophers. This was what they were dealing with and tackling. And we're going to see this as we go through this. This is why they became popular, because a lot of people, once they turned away from God or Christianity as a religion, there was no longer that existential grounding, and they were lost. And then World War I, World War II, devastation, you know, murder, just evil in the world. They couldn't make sense of this. So they were in a very dark place, people. And these existential philosophers came almost as prophets for them, right? And we'll explore what they said and how their ideas didn't really work, or they're not really solid, and we'll go through all of that. But it's very powerful if you think about it, right? This ayah. And there's so much you can glean from this particular ayah as well. And like I said, we'll come back to this, and it'll make more and more sense as we go through, you know, taking a sort of screenshot of the past couple of 100 years and how things have changed and where we are today, inshallah. So let's move on now to the significance. We'll start with worldviews, the discussion on worldviews, right? Islam is a worldview, right? I'm positing Islam is a worldview. One way of looking at Islam is that it is a worldview. Now, we'll get to why I'm saying this once we understand what a worldview means. But before we do that, I want to give you guys a quick thought experiment, okay? I'm going to show you my screen from where you are. Have a look. And I'm going to ask you a quick question based on what I show you. Ready? Yeah? Okay. If you've seen this before, don't take part in the experiment and don't say anything, okay? One of these circles is bigger than the other one, okay? The red one is circle A, the blue one is circle B, okay? Who believes circle A is bigger?
What was the colours again?
So, okay, let's do it this way. Circle A is red. Who believes circle A, red, is bigger? Show of hands. Who believes circle B, blue, is bigger? Okay, so red, okay, keep your hands up, blue. Red, keep your hands up, blue as well. Red, put your hands up.
What if we say that both are the same? Is there another option?
No, I said one of them is bigger than the other.
Oh,
have a look carefully.
It is the same. It's the red.
Okay.
The blue.
So blue, put your hands up, keep them up. Okay, red, put your hands up, keep them up. Blue, keep your hands up as well.
You have to pick.
Okay, I'm just looking at the outliers. Some people that didn't get the message. One of the circles is bigger. Yeah, bro, you're looking at angle here. I'll give you a better view. That'll probably help you. Okay, keep your hands up, red, blue. Okay, everyone look around. We could say maybe 80% of the group has one view or the other, right? 20%, some were confused. Who was confused? Didn't have enough time to look at the screen or the circles. Okay, who looked at it enough but was like, no, I don't think one is bigger than the other.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You said blue.
No, you said blue. Now you're changing. Now you're changing. Okay, the point is, none of the circles is bigger than the other one. They're both the same size. Okay? Yeah, but here's the point. 80% at least in this group, because some of you probably tried to be a bit more clever and say, no, I think they're both the same. It's a bit trick question. But 80% had a view, had a belief, right? Your beliefs, 80% of you, were based on my initial proposition, which was a belief I gave you.
Yeah.
I gave you a belief. One of the circles is bigger than the other.
Yeah, because you mentioned that.
Yes, and then
I have to say, I have to look at it like that. So when you said that there is,
But when you looked at it like that, did one look bigger than the other one to you?
I think because I was sitting on this side, I saw the blue one bigger.
Okay, but it did appear that way. That's why you choose A or B, right? Yeah. So the purpose of this is to highlight to you guys that this is how worldviews work, essentially, right? There is a set of fundamental beliefs, a system of beliefs, which then dictates your other beliefs.
The other thing is I trust you. So because I trust you, then I think, well,
No, but this is the thing
that
with
played a
worldviews.
huge role in it.
Yeah,
because
but you hold-
reality shouldn't be like that.
No,
It's
but you
reality
no,
there.
yeah, but the thing is, you hold a worldview because you trust that worldview to an extent, right? You trust the people that given it. You have it for a reason.
that's a
right?
huge factor.
Yeah. So the point here was that a worldview determines how you see and understand reality, right? If I hadn't said that to you in the beginning, I would assume most of you would be like, look at it, no, both are the same size. Yeah. Yes, the red might look slightly bigger because of the bright color and all of this stuff, but because of the initial belief I gave you, you had the other belief, right? So this is a basic now understanding we're starting with. A worldview, here's one idea I'm giving you. A worldview determines the other beliefs you have about reality. Okay? Now let's explore what else you think a worldview is.
A way of life.
Okay? A way of life.
Point
I
of
think
view.
it's specifically the intellectual aspect. I think way of life might be too broad.
Yeah.
That would encompass action as well. I
A
think
way of
it's-
life may stem from a worldview.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
I'd
it's
say it's how you value, like how you create your value system in a way.
Morals.
Yeah, so they tie into it as well, definitely.
Where you get your evidence is from what the world around you is.
Yeah. But fundamentally, what is a worldview?
It's how you see the world.
Okay, it's how you see the world. Yeah. So
Interpretation.
Ideology.
psychological.
Set of right or wrongs as well.
So that's what you've been told to believe.
it could be what you're told to believe. Yeah.
Psychological state that you have that's been constructed by your knowledge, experience, people around you.
Good. Yeah. Close. So it's a structured
It's a structure, yeah.
set of beliefs. Yeah. Fundamental structured set of beliefs that you hold about
The world.
reality. Yeah. Okay. So these are some good ideas, right? This is how they normally define it as well. Oxford reference, for example, says a largely unconscious but generally coherent set of presuppositions and beliefs that every person has, which shapes how we make sense of the world and everything in it. I think that's a nice basic definition. It's a fundamental set of beliefs and ideas that you hold about reality, which shapes how you see the world around you. Right? So is everyone clear with that? Yeah? Another way you can say it to really clarify this for us, it's a lens. We mentioned this in the previous course as well, right? It's a lens through which you see and understand reality, right? Or it's a sphere of beliefs that you hold, which then everything is filtered through. It's like a prism. You know, light comes into a prism, what happens to the light? Yeah, and you get white light and then it splits off into all the rainbow colors and it comes out a different way. Right? That's another nice way of looking at a worldview. Now, we don't think about this much, but every single human being has a worldview. You cannot function without a worldview. Right? Everyone does. How it develops, it could be different for everyone. Someone may be given it. Someone may develop it themselves through the early interactions with the world around them. Right? But everyone has a worldview. Okay, and it shapes how they see reality. Now, I'm going to give you a quick example so we can really ingrain this in our minds. Because having a clear understanding of this concept now is going to shape a lot of what we discuss. Okay? A worldview is very fundamental. Right? Atheists have a worldview. Feminists have a worldview. Christians have a worldview. Muslims have a worldview. Buddhists have a worldview. Right? Sikhs have a worldview. Hindus have a worldview. Everyone has a worldview. And sometimes it's not just one clearly defined worldview. For most people, it's a mix and mash of different ideas and worldviews together, right? Now let's take a quick example. Okay, who's seen some of the stuff on the whole UFO topic online? Some of us, yeah. You've seen some stuff come up on social media. Joe Rogan's been speaking about it. Tucker Carlson, all these popular YouTube guys. Right? There's been congressional hearings about it now in America. It's gone beyond the whole tinfoil hat type of crowd. You know, people are taking it serious. There's academic papers that have been written on it, right? On ResearchGate, there are some very interesting academic papers that have been published on it. A recent paper came out on plasma life forms and these UAPs or UFOs. So it's taken really seriously, this subject now. Now here's what's very interesting. There's what's being observed and seen, okay? So what are people seeing and observing? Sometimes they're seeing lights. Sometimes they're seeing orbs of light in the sky. Sometimes they're seeing these cryptid type creatures that emerge, right? Sometimes they are having interactions with these beings. Sometimes they're being abducted, right? Taken away. right? Sometimes they're being deceived by these entities or played with by these beings, these aliens, right? Now, the predominant view of what's going on amongst the secularists, the godless, is what? These are aliens. They're extraterrestrial. When they see these lights in the sky, they say these are craft, physical craft. These are assumptions, by the way. The question is, why are they going to these assumptions? Why are they saying when they see a light in the sky, this is a physical craft? They see a light maneuvering in very strange ways, defying conventional physics. They say, oh, it's a physical craft that's displaying these amazing feats and breaking our current understanding of physics. Right? Why are they saying these are extraterrestrial beings? Why are these abductees, people that have been abducted, who come from a secular background, saying these are aliens, who have been abducted by aliens? Why do you think they're saying this?
Also because in their physical worldview, there's this assumption that it could not be anything other than...
Yeah, it's their worldview.
Yeah.
We can see it at play here. So there's the phenomenon that's taking place, and this is in religious experience. When you study religious experience academically, you see that there's different parts of a religious experience. There's the phenomenon that takes place, and then there's the interpretation of that phenomenon by the experiencer. Now, how is that interpretation made? It's made through the mind, you can say, or some would say the brain, depending on what world you look at this from, of the experiencer. So there's input. The experiencer sees something in the world, it goes through his sense organs into his mind, and then it's processed. But it also passes through the prism of its worldview, which helps him process this information and come to a conclusion. Is everyone following me so far, yeah? So they see this input, okay, orb in the sky, doing all this funky stuff, it's a craft, it's an alien craft, right? Being abducted or having an experience, aliens abducted me. Why? Because their worldview does not allow for any other interpretation. Think of it from a secular perspective. We live in a technological age, right? People are used to technology, seeing technology, right? The best forms of technology are fighter jets, for example, military kit, yeah? So this is the prism. So they see these lights, they assume craft, albeit a craft that's performing amazing maneuvers, but it's a physical craft. It's an assumption. That's how they processed it. When they have an abduction experience, they say aliens are abducting us based on their worldview, because on their worldview, they can accept alien life.
They've been programmed since 1950. All these UFO movies came after
that's a big part of it.
Roswell.
Yep.
So, they've been given 50 years, more than that, of propaganda and movies and explanations as to, if you see something in the sky, it's shiny, then it's a UFO.
Yes.
If you see some creature with a big head,
it's an alien.
Yeah. So, that plays a huge role.
Absolutely. And if you go back, so here's an interesting thing. There's some academics that have done research on this, and what they've concluded is that this phenomenon, when I talk about phenomenon, all of this, what's being experienced, has been going on forever. It's been going on for centuries, right? One of the leading experts in this field, Dr. Jacques Vallée, his name is a French academic, he says that this has been going on for centuries. It's not a new phenomenon. But today, people are interpreting it as aliens from another planet. They don't have evidence to interpret it that way, but that's the interpretation they're giving it. If you look at the interpretations people gave it a few hundred years ago, it was totally different. They will call it a religious experience, a spiritual experience, right? If you read the essays on the jinn by Ibn Taymiyyah, right? It's a fascinating book. He talks about jinn abducting people. It's there, you read it. Jinn taking people away. There's narrations of the Prophet ﷺ to keep children in after the dark, so they're not taken away. There's a case at the time of, I believe it was Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, that a woman came to him asking for divorce from her husband because he went missing, right? And he's gone, she gets married, and he appears back several years later, right? It's in a narration, authentic narration, and he appears back and he says he's looking for his wife. And he asks him, what happened? Where were you? You were gone. No one knew where you went. And he said, I was abducted. I was taken away by the jinn, right? And they kept me there as prisoner until another group of jinn came. They defeated these jinn, and because they were believing jinn, they offered him to go back to his family. So they returned him. So abductions.
The leader of Al-Khazraj, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, I think that he was killed by jinn.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, I found that crazy.
Yeah, so the point is, we don't want to make this shift the topic on jinn, but the point is that from our worldview, our perspective, the same phenomenon has been taking place. Abductions have been taking place. The sort of trickster element of jinn play tricks on you. They call it so they've got a term. They call it the hitchhiker effect. That when people have this experience of these aliens, something gets attached to people and follows them around and affects them and their families. They call it the hitchhiker effect. We know about the attachment and possession phenomenon in the jinn, right? So the point is that depending on your worldview, you're going to interpret the same data in a different way.
I just got a question. What's the difference between worldview and epistemology? What's the main difference between those two?
So how would you define epistemology?
The way you get to know something.
Yeah, it's a part of it. We're going to look at this in a second, right? But a worldview is more of a general type of understanding of, okay, the basic beliefs that we have that help us understand reality, right? They affect our epistemology and so on as well. Okay, and we're going to get to that in a second. But right now, do we have a very clear sort of understanding of what a worldview is and how much impact it has? It literally shapes your reality, how you understand and interpret things, right? This is why even another example, Allah speaks about His signs. For a Muslim, it should be the case that when we go out into the world and we see the physical signs of the universe and the world, it should remind us of Allah and remind us of His creative power, right? That He is the why behind the how. He is the why behind everything. But when the secular, godless scientist looks at the same world, they don't see that. How many professors do we have that have studied the cosmos for decades, right? They've seen the intricacies of it. That professors that have studied the human body, biology. You know, Sabur was talking about, what's it called? Who's anyone doing biology here?
Got a doctor.
Where's the doctor? Medicine.
Yeah.
What's that thing? Phlegm? There's sort of the motor inside the cell or something.
It's called flagella?
Flagellum,
Yeah,
yeah. He was talking about that. It's amazing if you look at it and you say, SubhanAllah, how is this existing within a cell, right? But the scientists and doctors that have been studying this for decades, they don't see it. Again, what's determining what they see? It's their worldview, right? That's how significant a worldview is. But most people out there don't even know what the term worldview is, yet they have one, right? So it's good to understand this, inshallah. So moving on, let's look at a basic taxonomy of a worldview. Let's break down a worldview, okay? So there's the ontological element to this, right? And that's to do with existence. What exists and the source of existence, right? There's the epistemological side of it, which is knowledge. What are the sources of knowledge now, right? Then there's the moral aspect or the ethical aspect of it, which is what is right and wrong. These are the things your worldview determines, okay? And this is why, this is a basic breakdown of it. If you go through Sheikh Fahad's book, No Doubt, he's got a far more detailed breakdown of this, the taxonomy. We actually have a copy there, you guys can take one. He has actually a detailed taxonomy of this and he goes into more detail. But remember, I want to keep this for a younger audience, so we want to keep it, give them a bit of information, but don't make it overwhelming either, yeah? So this is a basic breakdown of the taxonomy of a worldview. It basically shapes the way you look at reality, how you understand things, how you study things, your epistemology, how you come to knowledge. What are the sources of knowledge? What exists? What is the nature of the existence itself? All of this is determined by a worldview. So what is the modern worldview? Let's now shape this for ourselves. So what is a predominant modern worldview?
Secularism.
Okay, so you can say secular, liberalism. Yeah, those two things are probably the key things, okay? Materialism. So secular, material, liberalism, you can say is ism. These are more of the offshoots, we can say, the byproducts of these worldview. But what's the dominant worldview is a type of secular liberalism, you can say, yeah? So how would you define these things? Now, how would you define secularism?
Separation of church and state.
Yeah, you can say that. That's one way of putting it.
Division of religion and modern life.
Yeah.
Politics and things.
Yeah, yeah. And liberalism?
Satisfying
Freedom.
your desires.
Oh, you guys did this with hijab, I think.
Freedom, individualism.
Okay, yeah, those are parts of it, yeah. Individualism is a big thing in liberalism. Individuality, atomism.
Multiplicity of views, where you can have anything goes basically, as long as you don't hurt other people.
Yeah, that's the sort of ethical side of it, right?
Maximizing utility.
Yeah. So the ethical dimension is the things you mentioned. You know, do what you like, just don't hurt anyone in the process. Yeah. What did you say?
Maximizing utility.
Utility is a big thing for this current modern secular liberal worldview. It's all about utility, right? Materialism, you can say, is a part of it as well. Naturalism or materialism. Yeah.
I'd say maximizing the freedom of choice for individuals.
Yeah. So that falls into the ethical realm a bit. Yes. What about, okay, so let's go through the sort of taxonomy with this now. So from an ontological perspective, existence. What is existence and the source of existence according to the secular, liberal, naturalistic worldview, modern worldview?
Chemical reactions, basically. We
Or even the
because-
postmodern worldview now that we're moving into.
They try to use science to explain everything.
So that comes into the epistemology, knowledge side of it. Let's stick to the ontology. What is the base reality of existence? What is it?
It's randomness. Matter.
Yeah, so there is no God. There is no supernatural. There's no divine. It's all chance. Yeah, everything is, we're here by essentially, that's what we're saying, chance. That's the best way you could put it. Yeah, they may, flourish this a bit by saying it in a more, academic way, but it's chance. Everything has just arisen by chance, right? Everything's an accident. Yeah, so there is no divine, there is no supernatural. It's all by chance, and it's all physical. That's the predominant view. Now we have the idealists coming up. There's some very popular idealist academics who say, no, it's not matter at base, it's actually consciousness, right? And this consciousness that produces the material physical world that we see around us. That view is becoming popular now as we move into the postmodern age, right? We'll talk about modernism and postmodernism in a little while and the sort of differentiators between the two. But fundamentally, if you take a sort of materialistic look at it or naturalistic look at it, it's all matter in motion. It's physical stuff that's here by chance and it's an accident. The Big Bang happened. Molecules and atoms randomly are just moving around in space and they're colliding into each other, and by chance they've formed into more complex forms of matter, resulting in our solar systems, within our galaxy, and within the solar system the Earth just happens to fall into its Goldilocks zone where life emerged and all of this type of stuff. Yeah. What else? Is there anything else you can add to that? I think that's a good ontological basis for it. Yeah, there's just accidental matter in motion, right? That's the basis of it. From a materialistic perspective, if you look at it from a idealist perspective, then they will say no, consciousness is at bottom. Then the whole holographic theory and all of this type of stuff comes into it, and there's different views in regards to this, right? Now, what about from an epistemological perspective? Roots to knowledge for the modern secular liberal world view.
Start with the five senses.
Okay, so and what emerges, what method of knowledge emerges from that? The predominant science, right? Now, let me preface this. Science isn't a bad method, it's a brilliant method. But what we're saying is, let's look at it from, okay, what is the predominant method for the source of knowledge for this secular liberal worldview? It's science. Science is fundamentally it, right? And we'll look into, so we may touch upon this, but has anyone studied the history of science and scientism or empiricism? Where it all started, or why it became popular? Not where it all started, but why it became popular. Okay, so it's a bit of homework for everyone. Look up the work of the logical positivists and the positivists. So the positivists, and I think positivists came first, and then the logical positivists. And they were mainly based in Vienna. They were a group of thinkers who pushed this idea that scientific knowledge is the way forward. Any other forms of knowledge or routes to knowledge are to be rejected and ignored. And the ones that came later, they refined it a little bit because they realized to say science is the only route to knowledge is self-contradictory. But the initial guys, the positivists, I think if I'm not mixing the two up, were the ones saying science is the only way to truth. What's the problem with that, with their position? Why is it self-contradictory?
It's an unscientific statement.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way of validating that statement. You can't take the statement and stick it into a test tube and measure it, right? You can't do that. So they realized the flaws of that, and then they sort of refined things a bit, but still keeping science at the pinnacle, at the top of the chain. So science for many people today, you'll see even on university campuses, they say science is the only way to truth, right? Some even go as far as seeing science as a type of religion, that's done away with God in some way, yeah? Others will say, no, it's the most sound route to knowledge. And yeah, sure, there's other routes to knowledge, and they have to acknowledge it because science itself is based on other forms of knowledge, right? Because if you look at the foundations of science, you require a few other things that science cannot validate or justify, right? What do you think those are?
Testimony.
Testimony's a big one, yeah? Because look, how does science work?
Experiments.
Yeah, but if you look at, say you look at one area of science, say you look at cosmology, right? Now, the view that where scientists are today with cosmology and their understanding of the universe, did it happen in one generation? No. There's a whole history to it, right? You can go back and trace the Newton, Einstein, and all of the other guys that played the crucial role in the development of these ideas and the understanding of the universe, right? And the fundamentals of it. Now, the scientists that are doing work today, can they go knock at Einstein's grave and speak to him? No. So what they're basing where do they learn about his work?
His papers.
His papers, his testimony, essentially.
But can they say they can repeat his tests to verify it?
Yeah, they can repeat them, they could try it, but then sometimes some scientists that have done that, they've come to different conclusions. That's why they're moving away from that sort of general relativity and towards other models now, right? But essentially it's testimony, right? At face value, right? Like when you do people that study evolution, they're basing their work on early on Dawkins' work. Not Dawkins, sorry, Darwin. Yeah? And they've progressed from that. Can one scientist do every single possible experiment? No. Right? Most papers are written, when you do write papers, academics here, do you go carry out all the experiments that those scientists have done before you quote them and reference them? Absolutely not. You'll be stuck with one paper for the rest of your life that way, yeah? You base it on their work, right? So testimony is an essential route to knowledge. So sometimes if someone comes to you and says, oh no, science is the only way to knowledge, well then highlight to them, well, science itself depends on other routes to knowledge, like testimony, right? Mathematics is another branch of knowledge that science requires, right? There are some base assumptions in science when you study the philosophy of science. What are they?
The future will act the same as the present.
Good. The future will act the same as the present or the past. Yeah. That's an axiom of science. You can't scientifically validate that. What else?
So you have a certain data set and you extrapolate that data set to all other evident data. So you'd have like 1,000 swans that are white. So you say all swans are white.
So what is that called? What's the term for that?
Generalized.
We're generalizing, but they've got a term for that.
Is it inductive?
Induction. Inductive reasoning, basically. So they will, because remember, every scientist has limited observations. They can't have the totality of observations at hand. It's impossible, right? So they look at a set data, and then based on that, they generalize. They induce the conclusion, which is reasonable, right? So a scientist in a field, he may sit there and he may be commissioned to look at the birds that fly over the field, and he makes notes. He says every bird that he sees for a month is brown, say for example. And then he concludes every bird that flies over this field in England is brown. It's a reasonable conclusion. Yeah, but is it absolute? No.
That's how we shifted from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics. And Newtonian physics worked pretty well for 200 years or so. And I think they were looking for a scientific observation. They couldn't find Mercury in a particular place at a particular time, and they had to revise the whole model.
Yeah.
And we ended up with on the Einsteinian model. And now it's going into quantum, so it's like constant shifts.
Yeah, shifting all the time. And the quantum realm is even more challenging because stuff that happens on that realm seems like it doesn't obey the laws of physics as outlined by other theories, right? So they have a limited set data, right? And it's a reasonable conclusion to say that the birds that fly over that field are brown, but it's possible that there may be, if they carried on doing another set of observations, there may be a black bird that flies over the field or a white bird, right? So therefore, you can't say that scientific conclusion is an absolute 100% fact, right? No philosopher of science would say that. Is it reasonable? Is it 80%, 90%, 95%? Sure. It could be any of those possibilities. It's never 100%, right? So science never gives you 100% fact, right? So it's not gospel truth, if you like, yeah, from that perspective. So again, it's not to say to undermine science. We're not trying to undermine it. We're just saying, look, let's pull it back a bit. Science isn't the holy grail of truth, right? Even within its sphere, right? Because remember, science is also limited to a sphere of reality, which is what? The observable reality. Someone mentioned senses, right? You need your physical senses to do science, to observe. It starts with observations, right? Right? So there are things that are beyond what could be observed via our five senses. Now, it doesn't mean just because you cannot grapple with those things that those things don't exist anymore. A reasonable scientist should say, this is outside the domain of science. Not that it doesn't exist, right? The latter statement is more of a sort of dogmatic, religious type of extremist type of statement, if you like. The former statement is a reasonable one. This thinks of science is amoral, for example, right? Science can't tell you about morals, although some Muppets, have tried to even squeeze morals into science, right? The moral landscape, yeah, that example. But the point is that you can't do it. Yeah, it's amoral. So yes, this is not the scope of science. So we don't speak about this. We keep morals out, right? But the point is science, so within the realm science can function within, which is the physical material world, even then it can't give you 100% fact. It's limited, right? Again, not to undermine science, it's the best method that we have to study the physical world, but it has its limitations. That's the point, right? What else? What other limitations of science are there? Now that we're talking about it, I might as well point out some of those things.
So you mentioned the positivists, and what was the other one?
Logical positivists.
Logical positive. And that's sort of what brought, you said, science to be the main way of...
That sort of pushed that idea and propelled the whole sort of focus towards science being the dominant.
Yeah. I'd say, well, I'm just thinking out loud, this might be more academically, but into like regular people on the street, the reason they value science so much or think so highly of it is because of recent technological advancement. Like that's just made science like, wow, I can, pick up the phone and call someone in a different part of the world.
Yep.
So I think it's just that technological advancement that's made science seem like it's the, the best way of knowing what is true and what is untrue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there have been some amazing technological advancements over the past, even just the past 50 years.
Yes.
Right, and this is why I keep emphasizing science is not a bad method. We're not outlining these things to undermine science. We're just saying, look, put it within perspective. There's been occasions in science where they've had an idea or a theory which was false, but led to something useful. And then later on they discovered that that was false. But it works in very mysterious ways sometimes, right? So, yes, go on.
I was going to say, so like if you look at let's say from the year 0 to the year, let's say 1700, technology doesn't really impact anyone's day-to-day life. Like, maybe a bit of agricultural improvement here, printing or so on and so forth. But they didn't appear to do anything that's invisible, like Wi-Fi. And that's why maybe even though there were people who saw science as, a way of seeing the truth, to the regular people, they didn't really see it as important as they do now. So that's one of the
So
things.
what do you mean by the regular people don't see it as?
So I meant, like you say, the positivists and the logical positivists. And what I'm trying to say is before that, it's not like people were not... it's a theory that I have that the reason people were not as involved, did not believe that science is the main way of acquiring truth is because they didn't have technological advancement. So they didn't really...
So it's a circle, isn't it? If they had paid attention to the science, they may have had more technological advancement. And I think some of that, at least from a European perspective, is down to the church and its engagement with society and how it sort of persecuted a lot of the free thinkers in the West. Islam didn't really have this issue. If you look at the golden age of Islam, 800 plus years, the sciences were encouraged, right? Now, one could argue that the fundamental reason why this was the case was because they understood the Quran, which emphasized the study of the physical world, right? So there are clear ayat in the Quran where Allah is encouraging you to look at the clouds, look at the sun, look at the camel and how it was created, and other verses. So they understood this impetus that was there in the Quran to study the physical world, to progress in knowledge and gain knowledge and seek knowledge. And you saw the Muslims do, they didn't destroy the works of the Greeks, right? They actually were the ones that preserved it and then worked on top of it, developed on top new theories on top of it. And that's where, one could argue Europe, and that's where Europe did get a lot of that initial knowledge from, which then they took back to the West and then, built upon. So yeah, I think because the church didn't encourage open, in this encouragement to, pursue the science and to develop the things and do all this stuff, I think that was a big reason why things were delayed. And that's why after the Enlightenment you see this huge sort of revolution take place scientifically and technologically. It happened after the Enlightenment. Islam never had this issue, right? So the Muslim scientists and Western European scientists who went over to the Islamic world, they studied with the Muslims. And there were some amazing technological advances made back then. Like some of the medical tools that are used today are still, they haven't been changed. They're still the same tools that were used or developed at the time, in the Muslim lands, right? That's probably one reason. Maybe the other reason was because the emphasis for society just generally was more on the spiritual than on the science, the technological. One could argue that maybe the church had a point from one perspective, maybe unknowingly, that some of the technologies that would be developed in the future would be detrimental, which they have been, right? A lot of stuff that's come out of science, some of the stuff that's come out of science is devastating, bro, if you think about it. Yeah.
That term they say technological giants but moral midgets.
Yeah.
That's what
and
it's
combine
turned
the
them
two
into.
there. Remove the ethical and moral dimension from the human being and give him this raw power. What's going to happen, man? What is happening? Yeah. I mean, even in AI, anyone that studies AI, I mean, there's a whole moral and ethical discussion that's taking place right now. The ethics of AI. And like I spoke to one of the guys that works in the field, and what he said was, because one of the things he highlighted, that a lot of guys that are up high in this, not from a business perspective, but the guys developing this stuff, they're quite eccentric characters, right? So they're not like the typical normal person. And the ethical side of stuff is left behind sometimes, in the pursuit to just develop this stuff. And not that I agree with Elon Musk, but he's highlighted some interesting things, right, about AI, at least when he speaks about that, how dangerous it could be. So prior to this, look at weapons of mass destruction, right? That's a devastation in and of itself, right? That was the scientific development. So, there are those issues that have come about as well. But I think the main thing here is, going back to the point, which is science is the predominant, seen as the predominant route to knowledge, right? Other routes may be acknowledged, but science is the dominant one. And it's good we sort of highlight, yes, science is important within a specific realm of reality, and it's given us some amazing things as well, no doubt. However, it's important to put science, at least philosophically, within its remit as well. Science can only deal with the physical observable world. Science can't give you an absolute 100% truth in any sphere, even within its sphere, right? And then there's the ethical dimension as well, which we'll discuss as we go along, inshallah. Yeah. Let's look at the moral and ethical side of stuff. So, modern, liberal, secular worldview that we live in today, ethics and morals. What is right and wrong? Where does that come from? How's that grounded?
It doesn't come from the legal system necessarily.
Okay.
There's a division between what is moral and what is legal. And so what the laws that are set down are not necessarily telling you what is right and wrong. Generally, people are given freedom to decide upon their own moral values, and then there is a thin layer of protection that means that supposedly people's interests won't conflict, and that comes down to sort of harm.
Yeah, so the harm principle comes into play. But what is it? How do they ground their moral values and duties?
Social construct.
Utilitarianism.
So utilitarianism is one?
Increase pleasure, decrease pain.
Yeah. But I mean, the basic sense of right and wrong, how is that grounded for people today?
It's subjective. Yeah.
Essentially, that's what we're left with.
Experience.
Okay, you can say experience.
That's
Yeah.
how I feel.
But everyone has different experiences, right? So it's, again, experience is subjective to the individual.
It's social, call it
Social norms.
social, yeah, construct.
Yeah.
Social construct.
I mean, look, if you look at the fluidity of what's ethical and what's right and what's wrong in society, and how often it changes, right?
Homosexuality, like, I think 5 years before I was born, it was illegal, and now it's basically promoted, in schools. So it's just a 50-year period, and you change from one pole, it goes in polar opposite direction.
Yep.
It's completely subjective, and
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing. So this and that, this also highlights to us the shift from modernity to post-modernity, because modernists, although they sort of turned away from spirituality, religion, and God, and became secular, they still wanted to hold on to some concepts and constructs. They still, wanted to hold on to morality and ethics that came from Christianity, right? But the postmodernists, they're like fully following through now, right? They're basically saying, look, this is all nonsense. Morals, ethics, truth is all subjective. It's what you make it, or it's what you want it to be.
The age of feelings.
Feelings, yeah. It's self-deification. People have a God complex today. Many people, most people. Because they are determining what their reality is, what is right, what is wrong, what is truth. It's all subjective.
What is my purpose?
Yeah, it's all subjective. It's all up in the air. So we shouldn't be shocked when you see all of these shifts within the moral outlook of society today and what they consider to be right today, which was wrong maybe even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and where we're going to be in the next 50 years, right? I mean, you start with that basis, that worldview, then you can see why it's going this way, right? So, and this is why, again, it should highlight to us that when we debate or discuss these things with people, right, a lot of times we grant them their worldview, right? And then we discuss on their terms and on their playing field, right? And this is why we find ourselves on the back foot most of the time, right? Proving God's existence. Here is an argument for God's existence. Here is a sound argument. Why do we have to do this? Let's go right to the root. Let's look at the worldviews first. Can your worldview even allow you to stand in the position where you can stand and argue with me? That's the first question we should ask them, right? Before we even have that discussion with them, right? So it's looking at it from a really, really sort of foundational perspective. That's what we're trying to do here. Okay, so a couple of things when it comes from what emerges now from the modern secular liberal worldview. We've discussed some of these things, and we'll wrap up on this as the last slide for today, inshallah. So a couple of things, it's not an exhaustive list, but some of the key things. Makeup of reality, right? So what is the makeup of reality? It's all an accident. It's all matter in motion. It's all physical stuff, atoms and molecules. That's what it is. There is no divine. There is no supernatural. Right? It's all one closed physical system. So source of existence. There is no God. There is no creator. Everything, again, emerged by chance. Meaning and purpose. What is the meaning and purpose according to them?
Nothing.
Yeah. You create your own meaning. You create your own purpose, right? Now, when we explore the existentialist philosophers next week, you'll see that where they went with this, basically, right? And again, we talked about the God complex. If you think about this, when you tell someone, you are the master of your own destiny, you create your own purpose, you create your own life, what are you essentially saying to them?
You're God.
You are God, man. That's what you're saying to them. Even if you don't explicitly say it, that's what you're implying. You're putting them on this pedestal, right? In a position that they're not supposed to be in. The human is not supposed to be in, right? And this is why when someone has been conditioned in that way, from that worldview, when you tell them to submit to a higher power, would they readily want to do that? They'll struggle with that concept and idea. It's because it's like, with sins, you engage in a sin, and you develop a taste for that. It's very hard to pull back from it. Not that you can't, but it's very hard. And then you find justification, so you carry on doing those sins, right? So it's very hard to sort of work your way back from that. What about the way of life? How do people choose to live under this worldview? What is the philosophy of life for these people? Materialism, yeah. YOLO mentality.
Do whatever you can.
Yeah, do whatever you can. Make the most of it.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself. Have fun.
Nihilism.
Yeah, hedonism, probably most
Hedonism,
people.
yeah.
I would say majority of people fall into hedonism because they're so distracted with fulfilling their desires and having fun and just keeping engaged constantly that nihilism, it happens for many people, but this is what safeguards them. So hedonism is almost like a buffer against nihilism.
So, can I mention something? If you have like a modern Western person, they're trying to maximize their health, change their diet, in order to prolong this hedonistic existence as much as they can.
Yeah.
You know, all this, but ultimately, that it's in the back of their mind that it's all going to break down. It's going to end up in death anyway.
Yeah.
So that leads to their depression and these kind of things.
Yeah, at least the ones that think about it.
Mm.
Many people don't even think that far. They just have fun, enjoy yourselves. This is why, secular liberalism it's a thing for the young people, right? Not for the elderly, man. Right? Because what's an elderly person gonna do, at that stage in their life? They can't have fun, desires are gone, what's left? And because it's such an individualistic society, what happens to the elderly? Loneliness.
Just waiting for death.
Yeah, loneliness. Yeah. Loneliness is one of the biggest killers in this country, right? So next week, what we're going to look at is the origins and the history briefly of how did this secular liberal modernity come about, right? What I want you guys to do for homework is look at some of that history and bring some different points if you can, inshallah, to that discussion. And also look at some of the existentialist philosophers, right? Because when people turned away from God, they found themselves in a very lost place. That was the emergence of the existentialists, right? Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and many others. Look at some of these guys, just such existentialist philosophers of the early 19th century, 18th century, and look at some of because all of them had slightly different views. Camus had his own perspective, Nietzsche had his own perspective, Jean-Paul Sartre had a slightly different view. They all had their own takes on it, on how to rescue the human being from this nihilism, basically. So have a look at that and we'll discuss that next week, inshallah. Yeah? Jazakallah khair. Any questions? No? Jazakallah khair, brothers. May Allah bless you.
Fantastic.